Hello and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, episode 82, Tuesday, October 18th, 2022.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and...
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make myself known.
J. Thaddeus Turtle, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back. I'm your host, Courtney, and I am joined, as always, by one of my favorite adventure companions, my lovely co-host, Emily.
Hey, Courtney. Hey, listeners. You know, adventure is out there, but today we're bringing adventure here to the podcast.
Yes, today we are excited to welcome back a guest author to the show. Recently, on episode 74, we interviewed Marcy Carriker Smothers regarding two books, Eat Like Walt, The Wonderful World of Disney Food, and Walt's Disneyland, A Walk in the Park with Walt Disney. Today, we're pleased to have Marcy back once again to discuss her latest publication, 100 Disney Adventures of a Lifetime, Magical Experiences from Around the World from National Geographic, which it will release next week on October 25th, so we got a little preview. As we shared in episode 74, Marcy is a California native and beyond her interest as a Disney historian has experience in radio and the food and wine industry. Welcome back, Marcy.
Well, thanks for having me back, Courtney and Emily.
Yeah, it's so exciting to have you back on the show, and we're excited to talk about your book from National Geographic and all things travel and adventures, which, speaking of which, on social media, Courtney and I saw that you recently traveled to Disneyland Paris. So how was your trip?
I am beyond besotted with Paris Disneyland. I have not cried in a long time since I left a Disney park. I'm lucky because I go to Disneyland a lot. I live in Northern California. I write there and work there a lot. I go to Walt Disney World 3 or 4 times a year. I cried. It is exceptional. It's staggeringly beautiful, exquisite, and details homages to Walt, of course, which I care deeply about. Our real bookstore, a proper bookstore with books, and above all these sort of books and characters looking down. It's just, and the food and Phantom Manor. I can just go on and on and on. At Walt's restaurant, I had been to Paris Disneyland one other time in 2017 in the winter, in January. It was really, really bitter cold. And I remember it in gray and white. I don't remember it in Technicolor. And so when I walked in on the pretty lovely series of 3 days, and it was nice outside and it was fall and the attractions were all running, and it was just, it blew my mind on every level. Congratulations to every Imagineer and every cast member at Paris Disneyland.
We're so glad you had a wonderful time. I have been, but it was 2016 since I was last there, so I would love to get back.
Well, you guys, right now with the euro and the dollar, it's really the reason I went. I have plenty of miles to fly, but it was such a bargain to go. And the Disneyland Hotel at Disneyland Paris is currently under renovation. But the other 3, the Marvel Hotel is open, the New York Hotel, and that's really, really cool, especially if you're a Marvel person. And then, of course, the Newport, which is like your Walt Disney World Yacht Club and Beach Club, and the Sequoia Lodge, which is kind of a mashup of Fort Wilderness and the Wilderness Lodge and Grand Californian at Disneyland. And that's where I stayed. And, it's ironic. I live in California and all the cast members' shirts say, California parks, I flew all the way to Paris to be home. But it's really intriguing, I think, to the European culture and to everyone, that's coming from around the world to see what it would be like to stay in something like a national park lodge.
Very cool. And you talked about Walt's restaurant on our last episode. We talked together. So getting to see your pictures of you eating there and sharing photos, it looked beautiful and delicious.
It has changed a lot. When I was there, it was still an entirely fancy French menu, and there was an homage to Walt's beloved cook, and his Mary Poppins, Thelma Pearl Howard, or Foo-Foo, and it had a nod to her potatoes. So it was just a very small one reference, and of course chili, but it really wasn't about Walt. Okay, this menu, every single item has a story about Walt, and in my mind, it's historically accurate and fascinating. And so one of the ones, like for the chili, it was we're in France, right? It's a deconstructed chili. So it was rice and black beans and beautiful filet of beef, like just perfectly cooked. And then the chili came in a can, i.e. a porcelain white, looks like a can, and that's what the chili came in. Then you poured it on top of the rice and beans and steak. And it was not only so good to eat, great to look at, and the menu was storytelling at its finest. I mean, bravo, bravo, bravo. But yeah, go ahead.
I believe that's one of the adventures in your book.
I said as an adventure early on when we first started the book, vetting all the different experiences back in July. That's because it was really important to me to have the adventure with Walt entries. In the very first meeting I had with my editor, Allison Johnson, and senior editor, Lisa Thomas, I might not exactly have her credit correct, but like the head honcho at Nat Geo. And we were talking about the experiences that they had sort of pre-vetted before I came on with the heads of the different departments and companies throughout Disney around the world. I had asked in Blue Sky, I taught them what Blue Sky meant. It's like, if we're doing a book that's celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Walt Disney Company, then I really think we should have Walt Disney adventure experiences that happen outside of the Disney official company. But because if you want to connect with Walt and get to know Walt, then and what inspired him and influenced him, then I would like to include them. And they said yes. So those are 10 separate entries. And then of course, I snuck a lot of Walt in throughout the snuck.
That was something we noticed right away reading. Because, we come into this really cool top 100 list, awesome adventures. And then you start reading it and being familiar with your past books, getting to talk to you before. As soon as we saw the Walt stuff, we're like, there's Walt. That's a Marcy touch there. She had to make sure Walt got in there.
I did, and that's how Walt's Restaurant. Even though I feel like it's something that you could connect with Walt before, because the architecture and the homages to him in the actual restaurant, both Stories and Lily's Boutique, were definitely Walt centric. I think maybe Courtney, they were that way when you went, but now with the menu being so focused, and also the children's menu, which was paper, they have a game in it, which was teaching the kids about Walt Disney. What's the name of Mickey Mouse? Where did Walt Disney spend his childhood? Really basic questions, but geared at that, 10 and under group to teach them about our founder. So that was great. And also at Paris Disneyland, I had walked through the Remy, the Bistro Chez Remy, but I wasn't able to eat there when I was there that one day in 2017. So to eat at Bistro Chez Remy, it's everything. Are you kidding me? I mean, you really feel like you're in the movie, and the food again was so good. So anyway, that's another adventure that was in the book, and now I got to experience, so I can add it to my tally of how many I've done.
Yes, we will get to the tally, but first we wanted to thank you and of course Litsky Public Relations for giving us this advanced copy. I will plug again for readers that it comes out on October 25th. So since probably many of them have not obviously had a chance to read the book unless they somehow got an advance copy, we'd love to just add some additional context. If you could give us maybe your elevator pitch for the book as you were having those conversations with your editor and Nat Geo.
Well, you guys know me well enough. I'm not that good with elevator pitch. There's so much storytelling.
Your vision, whatever you want to call it.
Well, it was really their vision, to be fair. So fade out, fade in. We're in last year in early July, and both Walt's Disneyland, that took me 3+ years to write, and Delicious Disney, Recipes and Stories from the Most Magical Place on Earth, which I partnered with Pam Brandon, but I wrote the narrative. So that took me a year. So my editor said, hey, I've got an idea for you. Do you want me to pitch you for Nat Geo? They're jumping into the Disney 100th anniversary game, and they have an idea for a book. Do you want to, audition for it? And I said no. I really did. I was like, I was done with these 2 books. I want to enjoy. And then of course, 5 minutes later, I'm like, all right, throw my hat in the ring. And then the next day, I woke up and there was an email from Allison Johnson, my editor, with an offer. I didn't even have to audition. She said, so that was kind of overwhelming because you're like, well, give me some space, a little buffer. So we got on a Zoom and I said, what are your expectations? At the time, they wanted to be done in 8 months. I mean, you could see the size of that book. It's a lot. And but you know what? Carpe diem, seize the day, said yes. So when we had those initial couple of meetings, as I said earlier, they had already gone to the cruise line, to the parks, to the major entities and said, what do you consider like the top experiences that every Disney fan should do? So they maybe had 40 or 50. And I threw out some of them, in my opinion. I thought, well, for whatever reason, I said, I asked to remove them. Then I asked to include the Walt entries. And we just went along. And over time, I just was, thanks to them for giving me so much latitude and trust to be able to have that radar, if you will, about what should or should not be in the book. And that just comes from being a geek, and loving Disney and going my whole life and having had some experience, being able to be in the parks. And slowly they developed. And, it was, I don't want to elaborate this because it was the pandemic. So there was no way to archives Walt Disney Archives wasn't functioning. And of course, I'm not traveling, going to look at all these places. So it was an interesting process, but we got it done. And I have to say thank you to the entire team, because it's not obviously just me. It's my great editor, Allison, the people with the photos, the maps we can talk about in the limited edition, just a tremendous collaboration of everybody working to get this done, what turned out to be finished in a year.
That's incredible. And looking through some of the books that National Geographic has, they have quite a few books that fall under this idea of like adventures of a lifetime, journeys of a lifetime. So how does yours, 100 Disney Adventures of a Lifetime, fit into this Nat Geo family?
It's a really good question, Emily. Well, this is the first ever publishing collaboration of National Geographic and Disney. And so when they had decided to do this book, they knew they were going to do, like you pointed out, sort of in the formula of what they've already done, 100, best hikes, 100 best scuba dives, 100 best. So that becomes interesting as a writer, because in my other books for Disney, all three, Eat Like Walt, Delicious Disney, and Walt's Disneyland, I write till I'm happy. I write till I've expressed everything I want to say. I never was assigned a word count. I could make it whatever I wanted as long as it was the story I wanted to tell. This being the type of book that it is that Nat Geo does, the word counts are pre-assigned. So a lot of times there's so much to say and I had to pack it in, condense it. It was not as it was just a different kind of challenge to make it as descriptive and interesting in less real estate.
Yeah, we definitely love to go into that writing process. I know you alluded to some of the limitations of research and writing for the pandemic, but how else did this differ from the books that we discussed a few episodes ago?
Well, for Walt's Disneyland, it's about, obviously Disneyland and Walt's era, so it's pretty specific, right? This is about the world of Disney, so it's just gigantor. And, even in the best of times, I have a friend of mine who's an influencer who said, yeah, he always puts research in air quotes, thinking, I'm like, research is fun, but it is a lot of work. And no, they did not, even if it wasn't the pandemic, I was not going to get to go tour, every single park in the world and go on every cruise ship, so what
Disney didn't give you the jet to do the 12 parks and on jet?
Emily, and
hard.
And that's interesting because that did not get announced until the book was actually just files were going to print. And it got announced and I wrote to my editor, I'm like, of course we have to include it. And it is, but the world was really waking up by the time the book was published. But no, I didn't get to do it. So what did I do? First and foremost, what I've learned for me as a Disney historian is that I now believe that I know pretty much the sources that are acceptable to the Walt Disney Archives. There's a lot that aren't and a lot that are. So I stuck with those. And also I have a pretty good library of my own of books that I relied on. And then honestly, YouTube, I would ride attractions on YouTube like everybody else because, I couldn't get to Shanghai or Tokyo or Paris. So the other rides, I had done, attractions, I had done. So it was interesting. but it was done with a balance of understanding what, and then understanding what would be good sources, reliable sources, research, only relying on research from those sources. And then, when the book was reviewed, if there was something I had wrong, thank goodness, people would point that out to me. Like, oh, you might have this wrong or that detail wrong, and then I could go back and tweak it.
Yeah, it's kind of fun to hear, though, that you're doing research the same way we all, like, watch attractions on YouTube as well.
It's true. I mean, and it's interesting because they're all different angles, whatever. I'm not going to name who they are, but there's some that I really relied on because I know the people and I know them really well, the people that posted them, the influencers that posted them. But really, that's the thing about the book that I love about it. There's a combination of achievable, free, which was very important to me, by the way. When we were doing the initial vetting, what they had come back with by querying everybody within the Disney company was, things that cost money. I'm like, well, no, we need to do pin trading. I mean, I gotta be honest with you, those natural people, they're so smart, but they had not done a Disney book before them. And they would say, pin trading, what's that? I'm like, oh, we got to do it. We got to have it. Popcorn buckets. What's with the popcorn buckets? I'm like, oh my gosh, you're kidding. People line up. They collect them and they use them for purses and they repurpose them and they hang them all over ears, something as simple as ears, and how important that they are to people. So I wanted it to be this, that combination of, if you could never get to the parks, like just like the people that will never ride those attractions that we watch on YouTube, you could still read about it and enjoy it. And that was the balance. Then you go to all the way to the aspirational, the ones like, the Disney jet around the world to all 12 parks, or Nat Geo's trip around the world on their private plane, which would probably be the extreme examples of probably no one that any of us know or ever, to be on
Nat Geo's listening, we should go and write a review for it. We're at your service. But continue talking about this vetting process, because there are so many things between 12 theme parks and resorts and Adventures by Disney. Like, how do you get to 100? You had mentioned that they came to you with a list. You had some of your own minds. How did you go through more of that negotiating? Or even for you, I'm sure you started with more than 100. How did you narrow that down?
It's an interesting question. And I would say it really was something that evolved, ebbed and tide over that course of writing the book, which was, a little less than a year, let's say 10 months, which was extremely fast. I worked every day with a few days off. And I loved it because I love what I do. So it's hard to really put a finger on what it was. It was just that sometimes it's a rabbit hole. This leads you to that, or, you can't include everything. So you try to pick the one that's most representative, like attractions, like Main Street USA, something that all the parks, castles, all parks share, things like that. And then, I've had enough time, going to the parks in my lifetime. I thought there's things that I thought that were just honestly were cool. So I included them. And that's a lot of that just because I want to do them, or I have done them, and I think you should too.
I loved the level of detail in some of those more unexpected choices. I think it'd be fun for us to get into some of these adventures. So I would love for each of us to share how many of the 100, or maybe more than 100, that we've done, and maybe highlights that we found in going reading on our end, writing, of course, on your end. So would you like to go first, Marcy?
I don't know. Should I go first, or should you guys go first?
We can go first.
Okay, you guys go.
All right, we'll go in order. Emily, you can go first.
Okay. So we had this discussion off air of how did you count, and we went by the categories that you wrote under. So for example, there was a category that said like thrill seekers, and then there were like 4 or 5 attractions. We just counted that as one, or at least that's how I counted. So I was at 31 or 32.
I was at 47, which surprised me, but I have an edge over Emily being based in Orlando, so really anything new that pops up at Walt Disney World, like, I'm more apt to do something like Keys to the Kingdom just on a Saturday versus having to plan for that ahead.
And of course, the lion's share of the adventures are at Walt Disney World.
Oh, yes.
Sure,
had the edge there.
Well, I add for myself to remember, this is a lifetime of my doing this, and so I am at 67. And And a few of them I just added when I was at Paris Disneyland, like seeing the dragon, I can never say it, La Tanière du Dragon, that is under the Sleeping Beauty Castle, La Belle de Bois Dormant. Am I saying that right?
I think so. That's better than I could have done.
Sounds good. So my French accent is covering, mangling the name. And so, yeah, that's how I got to that number. But what I think is interesting, and no, I haven't done this yet, there are 100 entries, or maybe snuck a couple more in. But like as Emily was saying, those sub-entries, Thrill Seekers or Eat Like Walt, well, there's all those restaurants, or Main Street USA, walking the Main Street USAs. There's probably way closer to, like, if you counted each individual thing, much, much more than 100. But there are 100 entries, and that's what we're discussing. And so I am impressed with both of you. And you've got a lot of work left to do, but let's face it, it's fun.
Yeah, I love a good challenge and bucket list. I think, some I might not get to do, like have a Disney fairy tale wedding, because I'm currently planning my wedding at Paddlefish at Disney Springs, which isn't technically Disney fairy tale wedding. I'm like, oh, I don't also plan on getting married again. So, maybe I'll get to 99, not 100, but
let's have a ruling and our unofficial 3-person committee.
Okay. Does that count?
Well, it does for now.
Okay.
It does for now.
Emily's my bridesmaid, so you get to be part of it.
First of all, we got to go back to Paddlefish and the original Empress Lily, but we pause that. I suggest to the court, for your question of you're not going to have a fairy tale wedding, but if you attend a fairy tale wedding, is that an experience? Does that?
Think so.
If that's true,
Emily
then I'm at 33.
Yay, Emily!
I just think of that because I actually recently went to a Disney wedding this past year. It was at the Boardwalk, and it concluded with a fireworks showing of Harmonious.
That's
dessert
2
party.
in 1, because you got to see a nighttime spectacular.
Right,
well, that one I had already counted.
I'm sure.
But I didn't think about me attending one versus having one. So I say it counts. I experienced one.
I would say, I agree. It counts. It's official. And the other thing I say, like things that evolve, like in the writing style. So I'm writing about fairy tale. Of course, there were no fairy tale weddings, right? So that was an interesting one. But there is a lot, obviously, online, and there's a lot of official fairy tale wedding things that are so cool. It became kind of obsessed myself. And then later, I did see a few, like the coach, Cinderella coach, come down the boardwalk too. But when I found out they were introduced after the first or second, even third draft of the book, the projection cakes. Okay, like you project on the castles, like you project on It's a Small World at Disneyland, you can project anything on a wedding cake. A moving projection, your favorite movie, your favorite lyrics, your favorite characters. Those cakes, but for fairy tale weddings, blow my mind.
They're cool. I've seen videos of them.
Yeah, so.
I would love to geek out briefly, and my favorite unexpected selection was the Nautilus walkthrough at Disneyland Paris, because I am a huge 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea fan. My fiance and I just dressed up as Captain Nemo, and I was the squid for Halloween at Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. So when I saw that, I was like, yes, I hope that never leaves Disneyland Paris, because it's such a delight to have those accessible experiences where you're just like, let's just take some time out of our day and get to walk through and immerse ourselves in the story here. So I almost cheered when I read that part.
I'm so happy you approved it. So there's an example of one that I did not get to see, and it was closed when I was at Paris Disney.
No.
So it was under refurbishment. But, I've certainly read a lot about it in the history of Nautilus, and, you can see it's in there. But that is a fair example of the process of writing and researching the book. No, I did not get to do everything personally. Yes, I hope to one day. I'm, getting closer all the time. But
of a lifetime.
Of a life, exactly. Got a lot of life left. That's an excellent point, Emily. And briefly, just catching up. Congratulations on your wedding, Courtney.
Thank you.
And Paddlefish and the beautiful regal Empress Lily that was christened by Lily and Disney herself. I'm not going to say anything, but stay tuned. I've got a big. I just love that space, and I think that you've chosen a beautiful venue.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to it. It'll be in March, so I still have time left for all my planning, which I am behind on.
So Courtney, you geeked out about the Nautilus. One that I really enjoyed reading, which listeners to the show, you're no stranger to the fact of our Disney College programs and our experiences, but you included things like Meet Minnie and Mickey Mouse, Dine with Character Friends, and Courtney and I, being cast members and former cast members, it was kind of cool to read about experiences that we've given other people. So those are two that I've had the honor, privilege to be friends with Minnie, Mickey, and a bunch of characters and actually do those for other people. So while I've done them myself, that was a kind of interesting thing for me to think about. I'm like, oh, but I crossed that off someone's bucket list for them,
I
which is
smiled
cool.
when I read that one because I was like, well, Emily dined with characters a lot.
I love dining with characters. They were a lot of fun.
I mean, it is because, again, I say this a lot with you guys, when, with friends in the park, everybody, it's for everybody. And just because one has done it 50 or 100 times, again, doesn't mean that somebody else hasn't done it. And it does not disqualify it if they're ubiquitous as an adventure, as something as simple as Mickey and Minnie. That is a big deal to me. Any of us who've seen, and I have a few of them on my Instagram, stories of the way the kids are reacting to the characters, and just we're all bawling. TikTok, I mean, I'm a hot mess when I'm watching, the little boy saluting, or, the little girl, taking her out of Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique, and bowing to all the princesses. That's very much an adventure of a lifetime. And there's a lot of meaning of adventure, but I think also what was really important for all of us, when I say, the team that was writing this book is, it is, I don't care for the term bucket list. To me, bucket list implies, it's just my personal bias. It's that, okay, I'm going to take the bucket list. So we purposely call these wish lists. And I don't know if we can segue, but briefly, I guess we can, if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's a limited edition linen covered book that it will only be sold in the parks and Shop Disney. And it's a different price point. And there's several things that make it different. Besides the linen cover, there are 23 bonus adventures in a gatefold in the center, or the D23 and the 1923 when Walt came to California and established the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio. And then also these two maps. Now, these maps are my pride and joy. Again, beginning of the process, first or second meeting with Team Nat Geo, I said, I have an idea for a map. And it's ephemera, and I know it's expensive, but, let me share my vision. It's like we would look at all the places in the world that Walt went that influenced either the parks or the movies that we know. And they said, oh, yeah, we've got cartographers on staff. Would you like us to assign you one? Boom. I'm like, assigning a cartographer? And Sarah, who's our incredible artist. So it's so whimsical and beautiful and definitely framing worthy. And then on the back side of that, then I add to my wish list for them, for Nat Geo, was, well, could we have some sort of poster where everybody identify where all the adventures are in the world, and then every time somebody does it, they can either, mark it off, or whatever.
Oh, fine.
I love stuff like that. All right, well, I'm very grateful for our advanced copy, but now I think Emily and I are buying another copy.
They really are so special. And here is, well, your listeners can't see it, but I'm showing you guys on Skype. See how great that is.
Oh my gosh.
So you see Pinocchio for Italy, and and see, and over here, so it's so sweet. The Marceline, Idaho, where they got married, the Three Caballeros, it's just so cool.
Emily and I are map nerds, so you're preaching to the choir here. We love books with maps.
That come to the map.
Yep.
It's really special. And some of those 23 bonus adventures are my favorite adventures because, again, that was, you come later in the game and things keep occurring to you. So an example that would be occurring to me, I should say. Well, the 23, when they asked me, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're just grinding out these 100. But I started thinking, ride the tender on the train, at least at Disneyland, which is the seat right behind the engine, on the locomotive where the train drivers are, where the engineers are. Go see all of Walt and Roy's stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Go to the El Capitan Theater, watch a Disney movie, and see the iconic organ. So those are the kind of things that are added in the deluxe edition that are just super duper fun, and I love them. And if it wasn't bonus material and the number wasn't 100. If it was 113 or whatever, they would have been in the book.
Well, I think once we reach 125 years or 150 years, you can just keep updating it with additional journeys.
Oh, man, I tell you what.
We're going to live forever.
I could keep updating it because, there's a world, you're always learning. It's just, a book is never finished, it just goes to print. So,
yes.
Well, speaking of wish lists, all of us have shared, we have not completed all of the 100 adventures in this book. So what is something on our wish lists that we all want to do? Courtney, do you want to kick us
I have
off?
so many.
Right? I know.
I mean, yeah, I'd love to say like the 12 countries, or so the 12 parks around the world on the jet, but I don't know, I would really like to go to Club 33. I think it's beautiful, the history and everything associated with it. That is top of my like Disney fan bucket list. But I will also say I appreciated that not everything was completely parks centric. You had parts that highlighted, and I think this came up a bit in Eat Like Walt as well, but restaurants that Walt Disney enjoyed in the Los Angeles area. And one of my, I haven't planned anything, but like travel, I'd love to do kind of Hollywood, Los Angeles, old Hollywood, immerse myself in the history, visit some of the other studios. But when I do that, I definitely plan to visit several of those restaurants that you mentioned just because of their heritage alone. Clearly, I'm a restaurant person.
We're going to have to figure out this Club 33 thing for you.
Okay. And Emily, too. I think, all right.
We're thinking our 33rd
Yes,
birthday.
that's what
We
I was
need to
gonna
find
say.
a way into Club 33.
We've got 3 years. We both turned 30 this year like Disneyland Paris. I think in 3 years we can find a way in.
Your Club 33s at Walt Disney World are pretty fabulous.
I haven't seen them. I've never seen pictures. Like, they keep that. I feel like I've seen pictures of Disneylands, but they keep those Walt Disney Worlds under lock and key. But I'm glad to hear that they're nice, too.
They are really cool. I've seen Adventureland. I've seen Epcot. So I've seen 2 of them. I haven't seen them all. But
I've seen the elevator.
I was gonna say, I've seen the outside of Animal Kingdoms. Like, you pass it on the way to the Lion King, Festival of the Lion King show.
There's definitely a lot outside of parks, for sure. You know, I mean, the natural thing is you see the cover of the book and we think of Disney. And I think the first thing we think of is either, you know, movies or parks when we think of Disney. So, okay, Emily, what about you?
So I also have quite a few. Courtney, if we're always on the same wavelength, you check my Club 33. Most of mine, I think, are very Disney history centric. So other than Club 33, I really want to do the Walk in Walt Footsteps tour and get to see his apartment above the firehouse, and also just get to Marcy. I haven't been to the Walt Disney Family Museum, so doing more of those heritage sites, which were those considered part of the 100? Your Walt travels with Walt, they're part of the 100?
Yeah, they're part of the 100. It's interesting you say that, so I'm going to go to those Adventures with Walt. There's 2 in each chapter, and they are, a lot of them are very historical, and one of them is Walt Disney Family Museum, Walt Disney Hometown Museum, Marceline, or the Walt Disney Hometown Museum. Stay tuned, July 3rd of 2023, where Walt had the 4th of July's and the fireworks and the Kiss Goodnights that he inspired him. I'm working with the Walt Disney Hometown Museum to have a very cool event for our Nat Geo book there. Anyway, about going to Marceline, come July 3rd next year. With regard to the apartment, Walt's apartment at Disneyland, I don't know how long it's going to last, but you guys probably saw they have a new tour, Walt's Main Street USA, that includes the apartment for sure. It used to not always necessarily Walk in Walt's Footsteps didn't automatically get you into Walt's apartment, though it often did. This time it's part of the experience is the Main Street, Walt's Main Street USA, I think it's called. It's changed. It came to be after the book was published. And then with regard to some of the other history, Walt's Barn to me is one of the most incredible experiences that you can have. And that is actually the only free Disney attraction in the world. They ask for donations, but it's all run by volunteers. And this is the barn that used to be at Walt's Carolwood home, where he had his train, where he would work inside and build things, tweak and tinker, work on his miniatures. And when the home was sold, Diane Disney Miller saved and moved it to Griffith Park. And inside that barn at Griffith Park, which is the one that Walt sat in, a lot of people consider that the birthplace of Imagineering, are like things that Walt built, is the phone that he used to call the house in. I mean, you really can connect with Walt there. And then I had the pleasure, thanks to Joanna Miller, who's Walt's oldest granddaughter, number 2 grandchild, she and her sons, Nick and Sebastian, are refurbishing Uncle Robert's home. Now, Uncle Robert's home on Kingswell is exactly where Walt went when he came in 1923. He rented a room And he also rented the garage, and he built with scrap lumber the animation stand, and that was the very first Disney Brothers cartoon studio. So you can I actually got a private tour and got to go inside the house, which is pretty cool. It's in a conservancy, so they're not doing tours, but you will be able to drive by and see the home. It was really cool. And also, they built a replica of the original garage where Walt founded his cartoon studio. Nearby at Disneyland at Stanley Ranch Museum is the actual garage. Walt did that. And again, it's just also accessible to the fan. I just love these Adventure with Walt entries. Okay, I can stop.
No, and you're adding more to our travel wish list. Would you like to share some of your wish list items?
Mine, I would say, it's interesting. Well, okay, there's two. Would be to go, I'd like to see all 6 castles. So I've been to Hong Kong, but I haven't seen the new castle. And I have not been to Shanghai, and I have not been to Tokyo. So really to see the 6 castles to me would be, I'm not going to get the jet trip. So, eventually make my way around the world and all 12 parks. And then the other thing I would like to do is, if you would ask me something, that I wish was in the book but wasn't, I would say is the trip that Joe Rohde is doing in July of next year. He's taking a group of Adventure by Disney luckouts to the Arctic. And so when I saw that come up, I'm like, I want to do that with Joe. Can you imagine he's doing sketching lessons? I mean, he's your host the entire time. And so those would be the two. One is actually not in the book, but that would be, and it was one that we considered, and I think it sold out so fast we couldn't put it in the book because it wasn't done. His writing the foreword for me, that was, in these initial conversations that we've been talking about through the entire podcast, that first and second conversation with the team at National Geographic, that's where the maps were born. That's where the Adventure with Walt entries happened. That's where we had this big discussion that we need a lot of free things like meeting Mickey and Minnie, and may not have been on their radar before. And I said, the ultimate, in my opinion, Disney adventure is Joe Rohde. And, and again, they were not Disney people. And they said, okay, we'll inquire. I'm like, this is my dream. And Allison Johnson, my editor, made it come true. And Joe wrote the foreword. And then I just got to do a panel with him at D23 Expo. And it's just a masterclass. I could listen to him forever. So, yeah.
I noticed in your acknowledgments that he was your top choice. And that made me so happy to see, because I agree he was a wonderful choice. How was the process for that? I don't know that we've ever talked about like having someone write a foreword to the book. Like, do you give them input? Did you get to review it and sign off on it?
Good questions. I don't think I've been asked that either. So let's do it first here. Right. Let's see. It was sheer terror. Because for me, the process was, I said to Allison, here's my first choice. It's Joe Rohde. And she said, I'll contact him. So she waited till we had something of a manuscript to show him. And she queried his interest and said that, and he said, yeah, let me read it. So he read it. And after reading it, he agreed to do it. But I had no contact with him when he was reading it. And though I knew he was, and I was like trembling and not sleeping, something like that, because I'm fun, but I'm not, and I'm a serious historian. I know those things, but I'm not erudite. I have such respect for him. And if your listeners aren't following Joe Rohde on Instagram, run right now.
Do it.
Sign up. Do it. Yeah. Talking about a masterclass every day from Joe Rohde. Yeah. So, so it was, I was not involved. And then Allison, my editor, got it, and she worked with him on it. And then when those two were happy, I got to see it. But even if I had input, it was perfect. We both, it's just perfect.
No notes.
Can I actually quote a piece?
Red pencil, sign off like Walt. Yeah, Marcy.
Can I actually quote a piece of his foreword?
Yes, absolutely.
So talking so far about what you said of all of the different adventures having that variety, I thought he captured that really well here. He says, quote, "So step out, make a choice, and see what happens. That is what adventure means, literally, from the original Latin adventurus, meaning about to happen. This book is a compendium of adventures, some full of exoticism and thrills, others closer to home and smaller in scale, all bringing a chance for something to happen. All you have to do is choose an adventure and go," end quote.
It's funny you mentioned that quote because it resonated to me too, and sometimes we don't collaborate on pieces, but I have, at the time of recording, 2 more Instagram posts planned for this episode, and I was going to use the quote from Joe in there, so I'm glad you mentioned it.
But it summarizes your book so well. Like you said, having so many different adventures that's accessible to everyone, and that adventure doesn't have to be the 12 parks on a jet plane. It can be meeting Mickey, getting your first ears. I feel like he captured that really well.
I do too, and actually that made me cry, and hearing you read it really makes me tear up because, yeah, I mean, it's also, for me, adventurous, if you've never had a churro and you've read about tasting something for the first time, it's part of it is just not knowing what's coming. A lot of the adventurers that I follow and explorers that I follow in social media or I read about in National Geographic magazine that I'm now completely addicted to online is that, a big part of it is just not knowing the outcome of adventure, and so that's part of to me, that really explains a lot of the excitement with an experience you haven't had before.
So like your previous books, and surely evident in our conversation by now, Walt is the heart of this story. And could you elaborate a little bit more on how you incorporated his adventures into the 100 highlights? You said there's 2 in every chapter. So how did you pick which ones go in each chapter or what parts?
Well, the chapters, one of the very first thing we did was sort of identify, because that was part of what Nat Geo had already decided, that they have a formula, if you will, where there's going to be 5 chapters and X amount, in each chapter. So once we decided what the chapter titles were going to be, then I just adjusted the Walt entries to go in there. So we have Let's Go Fly a Kite, Adventure is a Wonderful Thing, A Whole New World, which is vacations and excursions, Be Our Guest, counter service and white tablecloth dining, and When You Wish Upon a Star, which are really like the splurges, right? So I just sort of put them in to each one. I mean, I really knew which 10 I wanted to have from the very beginning, and that was easy. But for me, including Walt also, besides my introduction, which talks about Walt and his great association with National Geographic, if you look back at a lot of Walt's quotes, he'll talk about, and our Imagineers and our artists were, read in National Geographic, or we saw this, but, and this was where we got our research. He had an entire library installed at the studio of National Geographic magazines.
I loved that photo.
Isn't it amazing? Yeah, and so many people that worked at the studio would bring their personal copies and contribute them to the National Geographic Library. So Walt and Nat Geo go all the way back. So that's like the beginning of our story in 100 Disney Adventures of a Lifetime. Then, of course, my 10 Adventure with Walt entries, which all have to do with history, but more importantly, connecting with Walt, the human being and the person, not just the legend, and understanding where his influences, inspiration came from. And a lot of them are free or very inexpensive if you don't include the travel to get there, right? And then there's always more from Walt. So then then Walt's embedded in all the, oftentimes in the actual text. If there's a way I could weave Walt in, I did. And then I had a little sidebars that I would do more from Walt if I felt that there's more that I wanted to say. And it was like, it's a story caption, if you will. And I have those throughout. And also I have some legend has it, we call it in the book, where Disney legends that work with Walt comment or say something about that attraction, that adventure, as how they interpret that through Walt Disney. So I would say there's plenty of Walt, and I'm proud of that, because we are celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Walt Disney Company in 2023. And I wanted to believe that we're going to celebrate Walt forever, as you guys know in my books, but this is such a joy because it's not one specific subject. Like Walt was the culinary history of Disneyland. It is a way to look at Walt through the lens of food as a human being and regular guy also. And Walt's Disneyland's my love letter to Walt and the creation of Disneyland and his words and the people that built Disneyland with him. But this affects what all the Imagineers, all the cast members, everyone has done to further Walt's vision after he passed away. And they're now all around the world, and there's homages to Walt. I see them constantly, and wherever I am, and in the book, and particularly in the parks and the cruise ships, where people are honoring him. And it is important to me that we do that, because he's not,
Yeah, it's definitely a thread that we've seen throughout your work. I'd like to talk about just how beautiful this book is. We've talked a lot about the content at a high level, but National Geographic is, of course, known for their photography, and this book is filled with beautiful photographs. Like, I don't want to necessarily call it a coffee table book, but like it could absolutely be a coffee table book with just, let's flip through the photos. So how did you work with different photography teams to get the photographs you wanted for this book, or whether it was archives of existing photography, like that older Walt picture?
Well, it was a combination of really, in my books that I eat like Walt's Disneyland, and even the delicious Disney recipes and stories, I chose the concept, or art and photos, very, very involved with all that. And this time there just was no time for me to look at every photo, go to sign off. So the incredible team at National Geographic, and I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I am not thinking of the photo editor, but I'm going to find him for you. He was constantly sourcing as I was writing an entry. There's all these layers, so I don't see it. All was invisible to me, but he was looking for just the perfect right picture. But lots of times, I'd say at least 2 or 3 dozen times, I had an idea for a suggestion, and I would send a copy of it to Allison, my editor, and say, I think this photo would fit this entry great. And usually they would come from the Walt Disney Archives and would be something that I knew was owned by the company and should be pretty easy. One that I'm pretty proud of to have in the book is at the merry-go-round. It's at Griffith Park, which any of your fans know, of course, that is one of the major inspirations for Disneyland. And there's not a lot to say about the merry-go-round. I had a lot in it, and I still had some room. And I started thinking, wow, I love that photo of Sharon and Diane when they were little on the merry-go-round. And, that was there's several historical photos too, which, would be my influence, but I don't want to diminish because it really is the Nat Geo team that made it look beautiful in their photos. But back to the merry-go-round story. So I went and, I asked permission from the family to use that image, because you do ask permission from the Disney family if they're in it. And they said yes. They allowed that photo to be in the book, and that really touched me because they care so much about their grandpas, their fathers, the Walt legacy, the Walt Disney Family Museum. So that was cool. But really, all the heavy lifting was done by the incredible photo team at Nat Geo, and they had a steep learning curve too, right? Because it's their first Disney book, so they were sourcing from all over. I didn't see how it all came together until really closer to the end.
That was just beautiful. And I think if they're able to find all these beautiful photographs, we should also use National Geographic's wonderful skills in documentary making and turn this into a TV special for Disney Plus. How do we turn your book into a Disney Plus TV special by Nat Geo? I think it can be done.
You're talking my language. It would be such a blast. I mean, I would love to, and I would love to bring people along on the adventures to get their reaction, their blind reaction, if you will. By the way, I want to go back. It's Adrian Coakley is in charge. He's the person in charge of the stunning imagery. So thank you, Adrian. Thank you very much.
Yes, you did such a good job with this, and I do love that in the back, every single photo. This is the research nerd in me. Every single photo is sourced with where it came from, etc. So that was really cool to see, just all the different places they came from too.
I think that's really, really important. Exactly to your point, as research nerds, or people that writers in the future, broadcasting, whatever, to have the right and accurate information and the correct sources, because there is a lot of stuff that isn't correct out there, because we all know the internet isn't always right. So good. I'm very, very agree with you 100% on the sources. Same thing as like with Walt's Disneyland, there's 13,000 words and endnotes. It's a lot of words and endnotes, but I want to be sure that as time goes on, if people are going to repeat the story, they can go to the original source, read the entire thing, and we can perpetuate accurate and authentic history.
Emily's a history teacher. You don't have to tell her twice about.
I was just about. Can I ask a really geeky research nerd question? Do you write in Chicago Manual, MLA, or APA style?
Chicago Manual, but you know what? That's interesting. It's not because I choose that. Happy. Is that good? Okay.
I'm a Chicago fan, but that's just because that's what they made me write as a history major, so that's what I got used to. And I love endnotes versus in text citations.
I was an English major, so I'm team MLA over here, but that's just because that was the only thing I was ever taught.
I didn't like in text citations. I like them at the end, away from the writing.
It's not even my choice, really. It's the publisher. So this is Nat Geo's choice, Disney's choice. They tell me that is so over my head. I mean, I don't even remember Paula Sigmund Lowry, who is an amazing historian, and she actually was with Dave Smith at the beginning of the archives, and it just does body of work that's just staggering. And she's a master's of library science. So whenever I didn't know something, like, oh, what do I do with this? Like, she go, well, are you in Chicago Manual 17 or are you?
Right now, I have, like, if you look at the Chicago Manual that I have on my shelf from college, that's like Chicago Manual like 2009. So I probably don't even know the most updated anymore. But I just had a total geek moment that I had to ask.
I was going to say, I haven't touched MLA in years, but that's the only one I knew.
My students mostly write in MLA in high school, so I'm like back into MLA a little bit, trying to get them to cite their sources when they write. But I'm Team Chicago.
Good. All right, I passed. Right?
Well, you did mention that this is all part of the upcoming Disney 100 celebration commemorating the Walt Disney Company centennial in 2023. How would you say that your book captures the spirit of the 100th anniversary?
I think it captures through, a lot of it through Walt, but it just captures all the way that you can celebrate Disney. 100 years later, what Walt started in 1923 is evidence manifested in thousands of different ways. And there's a lot, and just there's a experience them, I mean, it's a big, broad category, but it comes down to, well, coming here with, the suitcase and the dream. And then, of course, tremendous credit and props to all the people that brought forward Walt's vision after he passed away and continue to do that. When I had a meeting with Bob Weiss at Walt Disney Imagineering, he said, we are the conscience of Walt Disney. And I loved hearing that. And a good friend of mine, Tom Fitzgerald, who is an Imagineer, and he wrote the afterword for Eat Like Walt. I mean, he expresses that to me. It's informed by what Walt would want. Very cool. Very, very.
I loved the part of Joe's foreword where he said, the world is filled with adventurous lives that got their start from a Disney experience, whether a conservation biologist who went to Disney's Animal Kingdom as a kid, an innovative engineer who was fascinated by the technology of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, a tourist inspired to explore Hawaii deeply because of a visit to Aulani, or a child who gained confidence by taking their first ride on Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. I feel like that captures it all right there. That is why we are all here today talking.
Yeah, thank you, Joe Rohde. It's really true. There's just a million ways to do it, and they're all fun.
So with the 100th anniversary on the horizon, what plans do we have? How do you want to celebrate the 100th? Like, what do you want to do in 2023? You already wrote a book.
Well, I wrote a book, and that's fun. And of course, like everything else, you want to keep checking. I'm going to be doing a lot because it's a 100th year celebration going all the way into the end of, next year. So lucky me, I'm going to be doing book signings and events throughout 23, like the Marceline Hometown Museum and the City of Marceline on July 3rd, but also, Walt Disney World and Walt's Barn and some of the places many of the places that are mentioned in the book. The other thing I'm really proud of is I was asked to write the prologue for the re-release of Walt Disney: An American Original by Bob Thomas, which I consider to be, the most important biography ever written about Walt. And I'm a crier, but I spent some time and I cried a lot writing that. It turns out, so I'm one of 4 commemorative essays. And Christopher Miller, Walt's grandson, also is writing one, which is unbelievable. I've had a chance to read it. It's just so very, very special. So that to me is a big part of celebrating, is getting people who want to know more about Walt Disney, go get a copy of An American Original and read it.
March 7th, 2023. I feel like Emily and I are about to
there's
pre-order
so many
it.
great books coming out for the 100th, and we hope to revisit or visit all of them if we can next year in our season.
Yeah, that's one of our favorites. We covered it early in the podcast because it was so formative I feel like each of us read it before our respective Disney college programs to put us in that mindset. And
I think you guys you're, Look of the Mouse podcast, but, I give you a lot of credit for reading, because I don't really meet too many people that have actually read it. Then maybe they've heard about it, and that's okay. When you have the time, someone do it. The other thing I really want to do for D100, the celebration, is to see the archives exhibit. I cannot wait to see that.
It is coming to, so closest to me and closest to my parents, the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, I believe, is its first stop, which is my hometown. And we have it in our calendars, like when tickets drop, we are getting, like, it is going to be a family excursion.
Well,
anytime.
World, but you have that.
Yeah, I think Emily might win for next
I
year.
get a lot of the museum stuff because I'm in a lot of metropolitan areas between Washington, D.C., New York, and Philadelphia. I have very easy access to those.
I don't know that we ever talked about this on the podcast because there wasn't a book tie-in, but in December, Emily and I both flew from our respective cities to Memphis to see the Disney Archives exhibit at Graceland celebrating 50 years of the archives. So if that was just a teaser of what D100 is going to be like, it's going to be beautiful.
If anyone wants to meet with me in Philadelphia, we can all go.
Let's have
a great city.
I'm in.
I'm in too. And I think it's interesting. I don't know if I'm not going to say anything, no spoilers, the way that it's organized, but it's just, and my friend Paula Sigmund Lowry, she was a curator. All my friends at the archives, there's too many to name, that just Rebecca Klein, the director of the archives, is simply amazing, and wrote the afterword, by the way, for Bob Thomas's Walt Disney An American Original. It's just the thought and consideration, the amount of work that everyone put into that for all of us to enjoy and to learn and to have that for us. That's really very, very high on my list.
Wonderful. Well, as a repeat guest, you have answered our usual go-to closing questions, but we thought this time we could wrap up kind of in the same vein. What did you learn about the writing process for this book specifically that will carry you into future projects?
I would say, I'm not going to say brevity because that's not the right word, but because, as I said at the top, I really had a fixed amount of real estate and I had a word count I had a word count, and that is harder to do than I realized. And so what I learned to do is be judicious, with words, remember what the story is and the story, and then the feeling I want people to have. So even if I couldn't put in every last detail that I would have if I had limitless space, did I leave you with a feeling? Did I leave you excited? Are you eager to add it to your wish list? And that it's not easy to write to a word count. I haven't done that since college, and then I was just like adding words to fluff it up, This was the opposite. This was like,
That's great. And aside from the new biography edition, is there anything else on the horizon we should make space for on our shelves?
I'm going to sound coy, but I do. I have a few NDAs, and
we understand those.
Yeah, so I'm just really excited to the projects that I care about. And actually, two of them are a book and one isn't, but they are in the Disney sphere. But honestly, this book has been the writing experience of a lifetime, the collaboration, a true collaboration of a lifetime. And I just want to enjoy meeting people in the parks and talking with them, doing events, doing podcasts with great fans and smart people like you guys, Courtney and Emily, and go take that in and enjoy it. That's what I want to do. So I'm not rushing to start writing right away. I'm in the enjoy the baby phase. I was pregnant, gave birth. Now I want to play with the baby a little bit.
Enjoy the baby phase for sure, but you know that we're always here whenever your next thing comes to fruition, because it is a pleasure for us to have you here.
Thank you, guys. A pleasure for me to be with you, and I really do appreciate your enthusiasm and support of books.
If you don't mind, we will preview who's coming next on our show. We are pleased to welcome another Disney author. We will be joined in early November by Ridley Pearson. Fans of the Kingdom Keepers series will recognize him as author of each of those books, among many others, but we're excited to focus on his latest release, Disney's Cautionary Tales. Cautionary Tales follows two teenagers, Tim and Billy, through 8 scary, quote, stories featuring iconic Disney characters like Belle and Chernabog. So this book is available now if you'd like to enjoy it during the spooky season, and then join us for the interview early next month. In the meantime, you can of course keep up with Book of the Mouse Club on Twitter and Instagram at Book of the Mouse, or email us with comments and ideas to bookofthemouseclub@gmail.com. Please be sure to review us on iTunes so others can find our podcast and read and listen along with us. If you want to keep up with me, Courtney, I'm on Instagram at GreatGutsby and Twitter at Courtney_Guth.
And you can follow me, Emily, on Instagram and Twitter at the same handle, at Emily_McD. And Marcy, remind us again where our listeners can connect with you and the best place to buy your books, and let us know if there is anything else that we should follow and look forward to on your social media.
Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. Thank you to National Geographic for entrusting me with this beautiful tome, and my editor, Allison Johnson, and my Disney editor, Wendy Lefcon. I wouldn't be here without you guys. So my Instagram is at Marcy Carriker Smothers, all one word, and my Twitter is at Marcy Smothers, just as my name. That's pretty much where I do my social. I'm not that good because I do just enough, to have a follower or two, but I really feel that when it all started, the craze started, and I was doing food radio with Guy Fieri, and everybody was taking pictures of their food when we were out to eat, and everybody was posting it right away. And the whole conversation thing, enjoying your food, talking about what you were eating, what happened in your day, went away because all people wanted to do was show what you're doing and post it. So I'm sort of a very itinerant poster, but do follow me and in terms of the books, I always encourage everybody to please go to your independent retailer. And if they don't if they don't carry it, ask them to order it for you. The limited edition will only be sold in the parks and on Shop Disney. Of course, you'll be able to get the regular book in the parks and Shop Disney and all the other places like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, etc. And I believe you will be able to find them in the stores at Target, which is pretty nice.
That is exciting. I'll definitely have to send you a picture if I see it on the shelves. That's always so exciting when I'm like, oh, I know them.
If you think I know them.
Yeah, when you see your book on a shelf in the store.
Oh. Now, I did put that on Instagram because I was mind blown. Where's my emoji with the head explode? When I was at Paris Disneyland and like Walt was in the window store.
That's what you wanted. You said you wanted your book in a window in Disneyland. And so you have Disneyland and Disneyland Paris. Your books have been featured in.
She's internationally known.
Well, I don't know, but Manger comme Walt,
It's like, that's so exciting. Congratulations.
Yes, we'll be sure to. I'm sure I will see it over here at Walt Disney World. So picture from Emily from Target, picture from wherever in Walt Disney World from me. And listeners, it's coming out a week from today. So be sure to check it out. We know that you'll love it as fans as much as we did. And Marcy, as now a veteran guest of Book of the Mouse Club, you know the drill. We like to close with a quote. So you have the honors ahead of you.
Well, today, if you don't mind, I decided to choose two quotes because Disney Adventures of a Lifetime, Magical Experiences from Around the World is the first time publishing collaboration with Disney and National Geographic. As I said earlier, they have a long history going back together. So I have one Nat Geo quote and one Walt quote. The Nat Geo, one of their mantras is, curiosity is for everyone. And I love that. I'm a very curious person. And Walt always said, when you're curious, you find lots of interesting things to do. And I can certainly say that curiosity, as I like to say, insatiable curiosity has informed my writing career. And I just feel so lucky to be able to go out in the Disney and Nat Geo world, boom, marry them together and take you to where my curiosity took me.
We're so grateful to be along on the journey with you. Thank you again.
Thank you, guys.
So everyone, stay curious and remember, adventure is out there.
Book of the Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.